What is up, everybody? It is JJ Buckets, and I have a guest on the channel once again. What's up, Waraich?
Hey JJ, thank you for having me on here. It's always fun doing these discussions.
Absolutely. And today it's going to be a fun one. We are doing a trade deadline preview. Now, obviously, the trade deadline is one of the toughest periods, I'd say, within the basketball season to really predict and nail down. So, by all means, don't look at this as like I guess, ironclad, or what's the expression that I'm looking for here? Prophecy. That's what I'm looking for. We're just going to take our best guesses and a good discussion of what the Raptors could be, should be looking at. When it comes to this deadline, we're going to look at the biggest needs for this team. We are going to look at the assets that they could potentially be looking to flip. And then we're going to look at a few targets that each of us like. That's going to be the discussion today. Now, before I fully jump into things, just make sure you're leaving a like on the video. It makes a huge difference in the algorithm. It is greatly appreciated, helps both of our exposure. And just don't forget to go check out the Waraich Report on his channel after you're done watching this video on mine. So with that being said, let's jump in. Starting off with the biggest needs for the Raptors. Now, I think this one for me is really clear, but I'm going to let you lead things off here just because in my head, I'm just so adamant about this at this point. What do you got for
Now,
biggest need?
this is tough because obviously the Raptors have they don't have one particular need, but I'm going to go with the center position. Now, we know Precious is getting minutes. We know Ken Burge, although he's been injured, he is very reliable in terms of just fitting in with what the Raptors do on the defensive side. And he's got the funny little pushed, I don't know, whatever you want to call that shot he always makes. But I think just generally speaking, when we talk about Ken Burge and the centers we have, they're great. But we know for a fact that those aren't necessarily starting caliber centers, at least not yet with Precious. I'm really high on Precious. I don't know how you feel about him, but I really do believe the Raptors need a center, but it's not going to be easy trading for one. That's the thing, right? We had Marc Gasol, we had Serge Ibaka, and I really feel like we took him for granted. I mean, when you take a look around the league now, every team needs that kind of center that is able to play good defense, that can stretch the floor, and is a physical center as well. So it's not going to be an easy need, but I know the Raptors definitely need to address this as soon as possible. Get a starting caliber center.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting one. I mean, obviously, I just like literally my last video, I was talking about like center trade targets that the Raptors could look at. And I do see the need there. I'm tempted, despite all that talk, to say the Raptors can survive without one. Obviously, again, especially because I don't think they're really in title contention this year. Your biggest goal is just making it to the playoffs, getting experience for your guys, maybe stealing a series, maybe two, who knows, depending on how optimistic you want to be about this year's team. Realistically, though, to me, if you want to do any serious damage in the playoffs, though, and it's funny because obviously in the playoffs, the impact of this might be a little more minimized, but I just think it's been such a glaring weakness for this team all year that I have to come out and say, God damn, we need some reliable bench production. Like at least just like one guy that every night you can count on just being consistent and just being a force off the bench. So if you're getting your deeper games, or even when you're going into deeper starter minutes, or hell, if somebody's in foul trouble come playoff time, something of the sort, basically. So you can have that one guy that is coming off the bench and that could reliably fit in, get you that production, because it's been bad this year. I mean, Chris Boucher has had his ups and downs. He's had times where he's looked really good, and he's had a lot of times where he's looked really bad. Obviously, you have Precious coming off the bench now. He is still very unpolished. Again, like you could be high on his future, absolutely, but in the present and now, and as far as the impact this season, he's not that guy. Frankly, nobody on that bench is. I'd be tempted to say that if he was here and if he was playing and if he didn't have spite against the Raptors for whatever reason, Goran Dragic would actually be a perfect player to fit this role. But he doesn't want to be here, so what can you do? Ultimately, though, I do think as this regular season wears on, and even in instances in the playoffs, you're going to want that go-to bench player that can just reliably step in and supplement your starters so you're not absolutely running them into the ground. For me, that's the big one right now.
Okay, so I'm gonna let's once before we break down where the Raptors, obviously you had bench pieces, and before we talk about them needing bench piece, obviously we have our starting of Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, OG, Gary, and Fred. So those five guys, and you're saying we obviously need some bench pieces, and then we got Chris Boucher and Precious Achiuwa coming off the bench, and depending if someone like a Champagny, I know Utah hasn't been playing, and I'm not saying Utah is reliable in any shape or form. But those are essentially in playoffs, you're going to be running a 7-8 man rotation. The eighth man is realistically going to get around 5 to 7 minutes. He's not going to be getting a lot of minutes. And we know your top 5, 6 guys are going to be getting heavy minutes. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't trade for a bench player. Obviously, we do need help. I still think the biggest issue with the Raptors is the center position, because when you talk about needing bench help, I think when you talk about teams like the Philadelphia 76ers, obviously we have done a great job of guarding Giannis, even though he gets us, 25, 30 points every single game. I feel like we
Sorry, you
need
you
that
said
paint.
76ers there, and then you said Giannis. I am
Well,
confused.
yeah, yeah. Well, I meant 76ers as in if you face these teams in the playoffs, you're
I
facing
gotcha.
Joel Embiid and you're facing Giannis, you need that wall. I mean, you don't necessarily need that wall anymore, just because I feel like the Raptors have done such a good job of just figuring out his weaknesses, Giannis's weaknesses. As talented as he is in the half court offense, he has that trouble of really generating offense. He's a great player, don't get me wrong, but I really feel like we need that paint presence, because when we talk about bench pieces and we talk about, obviously our guys playing heavy minutes and they get really fatigued because they're running around, sometimes it's just giving up that second chance point. It's you have Pascal, Scotty, Gary Trent Jr., OG just scrambling every single, to every single 3-point shooter there is. That's because we keep continuously double teaming in the paint, whether that's Joel Embiid, whether that's a basic center. We've seen that time and time again. It's just the Raptors continuously turn to just double team, and then they just leave that 3-point shooter open. Now, I understand, look, realistically speaking, JJ, there's not one that can guard Giannis, well, Embiid one-on-one, and we're going to have to double team him regardless. But at least someone who don't want someone like Pascal Siakam guarding. Is JJ still there?
JJ is absolutely still here, and
JJ.
your Wi-Fi is letting you down a little bit, but I feel
Ah,
like
it's my
I
Wi-Fi again. I
it's
made so many great points.
and the Wi-Fi won't even let him say that he's made the
Yeah,
great points.
JJ.
um, like
Oh my God.
I caught part of that. I feel like for the most part, like the bits and pieces that came out were comprehensible. Now here is my plot twist on the what you're saying. You could do both. In my eyes, you can get, you know, the guy that you're coming back that's going to give you the bench scoring. You can have that be at the center position, and you can also have that guy be your six man off the bench. Um, like there's a couple of realistically like different approaches that you could take depending on who you're really looking at. You can either, consider Scott, keeping your starting lineup as is, and then just like having that center that's reliable and a go-to. And I have somebody really in mind, frankly, for when we get to the targets here, that really is kind of a good combination of both, where like he'll get you some consistent production, but then also, in the moments where you need to play those bigger lineups, he'll be ready and available. So that's my thing, where I still think the bench is the bigger problem there. But realistically speaking, I think there are trades out there where you can do both. For the most part, I don't think the starting lineup is getting touched. I think the Raptors like what they have with the starting lineup. So if you're getting a big, or if you're getting a bench player to help with the production, we might be talking about one and the same thing here in terms of what the Raptors are going to be acquiring, or at least looking to acquire, and how that's going to blend into this team.
Okay. Now I know obviously we got some other, segments we have to break into in terms of, players, assets, but in terms of when you talk about getting a center off the bench, the big issue becomes, are we going to be playing that center along Precious Achiuwa as well? That's the big question, because we can definitely acquire center, and don't get me wrong, I'd love with center. We obviously do need a bigger center. That's quite obvious, but then the issue becomes like, where do you play him? Do you play him with Precious Achiuwa? Do you insert him in the starting lineup? Do you use one of our starters off of the bench? It becomes really tricky, right? So
Mhm. Again, with all love and respect to Precious, he could have a tremendous future ahead of him. But if you're cutting into Precious Achua's minutes for somebody that's more reliable, so be it. Precious isn't there yet. And the thing with these project players is that sometimes they never really get there. I'm not saying it's going to be the case here at all. I'm just saying, like, regardless, once you get to the playoff time, Precious's minutes are going to take a hit one way or another. So if
No,
it's
whoever
for a better player joining this team, so be it.
whoever the center is better be a good name, JJ. Because if you're saying he's getting minutes over Precious, and I'm not saying Precious is there yet, like you said, you do make some great points about him needing a lot more development. And if we're being realistic, I don't see Precious getting more than 5, 7, 8 minutes during the game in the playoffs as well. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. So should we jump into our next subject of, did you want to do the assets first, or did you want to do some targets? Do you see the Raptors coming back?
Yeah, let's talk assets, because I feel like for the most part, the assets conversation is a really quick and easy one to have. And it's because this team doesn't have a lot of it, right? It's not that, sorry, let me rephrase that. It's not that this team doesn't have a lot of assets. It's that this team doesn't have a lot of assets that I think realistically,
They want to trade.
yes, or ideally that they want to trade. I don't believe the starting lineup is getting touched whatsoever in terms of any of those guys getting traded. So that immediately goes out the window. So the moves are probably going to be a little more minor, if they are making moves at the deadline, but the moves are available. And obviously, if you're talking assets, what are you looking to move? Goran Dragic, obviously, we've heard a lot of that talk. He's definitely going to be near the top of the list if they can do some salary matching, get some good pieces back for him. I think they're absolutely going to shoot their shot with that. Obviously, past that, you've also heard Chris Boucher's name come up in reports. He's an expiring contract. I don't know what he thinks he's worth out there, but if him and Masai don't agree, I think you probably are selling him at the deadline. And then lastly, the future assets, right? Like, we're talking draft picks and stuff like that. Realistically, I don't really see that many more assets on this team past that. Maybe Malachi Flynn, if there's still a team out there that likes what, the flashes they've seen from Malachi and think that they can do a better job than Nick Nurse with developing. Yes, that is absolutely the word. Developing him into a better player. He could be an asset in there as well. But for the most part, I really don't think outside of that, there's anybody that's really alluring to a different team out there, or that's really in contention that to be moved at the deadline.
Yeah, that's fair. So you're saying Delano Banton isn't an asset, or is not one you'd want to trade?
I don't think he's one in contention to be moved at the deadline here. It's his rookie year. You have him under control, obviously, for a little bit while longer there. I don't think Banton's going anywhere at the deadline.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, like you said, it's a short topic. I think it's fair to say, if Raptors fans agree on one thing, it's that we don't have a lot of assets. And like you said, we obviously have our starting 5. A lot of them aren't being moved. Malachi Flynn isn't really an asset, let's be honest. As much as I like Malachi, I really truly believe he's a very skilled player. Raptors fans need to be patient with him, but he's not an asset. So Goran Dragic, essentially future first round and second round picks. And again, I don't know if, unless you want to throw David Johnson in there, I don't know how valuable he is on a trade market. So again, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, let's move on to our next section of Raptors targets, player targets. Yeah. Go ahead, JJ. I'll let you go first on this one here.
I appreciate it. And I mean, I think this one's really simple and easy. Obviously, I've had a couple of videos in a row now where I've talked about like kind of the more bargain targets. I've talked about the bigs. Now, there's a theme here, right? And there's been a theme with what we're talking about. There's not a lot that the Raptors are probably looking to surrender. Like, when it comes to assets, we don't have plenty of it. And in all likelihood in this scenario, you're probably going to be giving up maybe a first rounder. So with this one in mind, it's relatively cheap. I don't think it's going to be a huge cost to get him. And past that, on top of being relatively cheap, it addresses the big man issue. It could also help with some bench production in terms of having a little bit more of a reliable guy, especially if, depending on, the way you clash the minutes, you can keep him out there with a Scotty Barnes or a Fred VanVleet to help him get some good looks. And it is going to be one that I think Raptors fans still like quite a bit. Jakob Poeltl. I think Jakob Poeltl is absolutely my go-to here. I think he can give you obviously quality minutes at that 5 spot, like you were saying, against teams that are going to be a little more traditional with, those interior presences like a Giannis. Obviously, Giannis isn't a traditional center by any means, but like Giannis is a big man. I don't know why some people look at him as a wing. I mean, yes, I get he can handle the ball, but like so can other guys like Jokic. Anyways, this is besides the point. Like against bigs like Giannis, against bigs like Embiid, I think Poeltl can give you some more of those traditional minutes. I also think obviously if you pair him in the right lineups where you have somebody like a Pascal to play make, or a Fred VanVleet to play make, or a God, who am I blanking on? Scotty Barnes to play make. They can definitely create some beautiful music out there, and I think he can give you more considerably consistent production than somebody like a Chris Boucher, who's a little bit more of an enigma. So yeah, like I am all for that move. I think you kill 2 birds with 1 stone in that one. I think he slots right into the 6-man spot. Against the bigger lineups, you kind of give him a little bit heavier minutes, but otherwise, again, I don't think your starting lineup gets touched. I think it gets left as is. But again, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, a name management likes, I think a name fans like, and a guy that is still young enough that you don't feel awful about giving up, potentially picks and other such.
Yeah, no, that's Jakob Poeltl is a very good piece, and I know I've heard a lot of trades, but I do want to quickly ask you, what would you give up for Jakob Poeltl, realistically speaking? And obviously, you can't say Chris Boucher and a second round pick. Try to keep it realistic, JJ. Not that you're never realistic, but something that would actually happen.
I only live in the world of reality. So naturally, David Johnson and like a second round pick. I'm kidding.
I thought you were serious. I was like, what?
No, like I do think Jakob, especially given the situation of the Spurs, probably commands 1 first round pick and then whatever you're doing with the players, which I think is fine. Again, I think Jakob is still young enough that you're okay with that. And it's kind of funny because I guess with hindsight, it kind of turns that like Kawhi trade that they had back in the day into DeMar and like 2 first round picks because they're obviously trying to take Jakob back in this situation. So I really don't mind it. Like, again, if we were talking about a player that was like closer, like in their 30s or something like that, I really would be hesitant about giving up a first rounder. But Jakob's still young enough that he can kind of age with the core, get better with the core, and he's already a fine quality player as it is. So I'm okay with giving up a first and whatever is needed to make the money work. If they want the expiring contract of Goran Dragic, so be it. Whatever the case is there, again, that side I don't think is the important part. I think the important part is that you're probably giving up a first in this situation, and I'm more or less okay with it.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think, given the trades that have just happened, obviously we saw the Karis LeVert trade, decent trade, but just that Norman Powell trade, it doesn't seem like teams are giving up a lot to get a lot. So I think a lot of I should say fans were throwing out trades like first round pick, Precious Achiuwa, and other assets as well. But I don't think the Raptors necessarily need to give up that much. Again, teams, I don't know why I keep saying teams, but fans obviously view, Jakob Poeltl as a part of the Spurs, core, which I don't really see. He's 26 years old. I think they're going towards some of the younger guys that are 22, 23 years old. So he's only got another year, I believe, after this season. So I don't think it'll be very expensive. The only question mark I have surrounding Jakob Poeltl, now if you're not giving up Precious Achiuwa, and you said you want him off the bench, are you essentially playing Jakob Poeltl and Precious Achiuwa together off the bench? Or some sort of rotation of where, you're giving this guy that many minutes and that guy a few minutes?
That's the interesting part there. Again, I think Precious's minutes are probably going to get cut a lot. I wouldn't expect Precious to really be playing more than like around the 10-minute mark if we're talking regular season in that situation. Can you play them together? I think you can experiment with it. I'm not saying it'll work, but I've seen Nick Nurse experiment with weirder. So I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to make that work. Again, Precious is raw enough that you could try to kind of, put new things into his skill set or, Yeah, like that is actually how I'm trying to describe that. Yeah. So like if you want to like try running him at the 4 and try him in a different role. But again, I think if you get the arrival of somebody like Jakob Poeltl, I think Precious's minutes are coming down.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fair. But now I'm going to throw some questions at you here again, JJ. So you said you're talking about, killing two birds with one stone, but
Give me a break here, man.
you're trying to get a sip of water, and I'm just like, nope, not yet. So you were saying killing two birds with one stone in terms of getting a center and someone who can give you point production. But I just don't see, like, don't get me wrong, I'm all for Jakob Poeltl. But in terms of him coming off the bench and really expecting him to produce some points or just produce something offensively, I just don't see it. He's averaging 8 points this season, and that's, as I believe, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that's as their starting center, right? The Spurs starting center this year. It could be 9 points, it could be 9. I could be wrong here, but
yeah, fair. I mean, his points per game tally isn't really that high, but like again, I think in most of these scenarios, you're really kind of looking to pair him with a playmaker that's going to get him those open looks. And I'm not looking at him and really expecting a Jordan Clarkson type of player there, but but I do think, again, like with the right lineups, with the right teammates around him, feeding him the ball, and with a system in front of him and with a role where he is look to that scoring punch a little bit more, I do think we can get some relatively consistent production from him.
Okay, fair enough. And do you want to go into your second player, or do you want me to mention my first and then kind of go side to side here?
Honestly, Jakob's really the big one for me. So whatever you got, throw it at me.
All right, so I'm going to go in a different direction and actually see someone like Josh Hart. Now, this one may be a little bit of a weird player. I mean, not a lot of Raptors fans really thought of him, but currently his statistics with the New Orleans Pelicans, and I'm not saying he's going to produce the same with the Raptors. Obviously, he's getting a bigger role with the Pelicans, and he's going to be likely a 6th, 7th man off the bench for the Raptors. But currently, this season, Josh Hart, 13.4 points, 7.8 rebounds, a big stat here, which I absolutely am surprised at, but I also love. 4.1 assists. He's giving you 1.1 steal as well as shooting 32%, which I mean isn't the greatest, but at least he can shoot the 3, right? So, and his field goal percentage is 50%, which is not too bad at all. Now the only thing is he's 74% from the free throw line. We know the Raptors have had their troubles, but he's someone I would personally really like. He's making $12 million for, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, another couple seasons at least, or 3 seasons, correct me if I'm wrong. 3 seasons in total, including this one. So 2 more seasons after this season, $12 million, 26-year-old, 6'5", 215 pounds. He's a great defender. He's a great rebounder, and he just plays very hard and gritty. And I think Nick Nurse can, and I genuinely mean this when I say this, you can rely on him consistently to give you, expect, certain things from him. Rebounds, he can pass, he can give you a decent amount of points. I'm not saying he's a go-to scorer, but he's someone we can definitely use in our rotation, given the fact that we don't really have a lot of depth at that shooting guard position and the small forward position behind Gary and OG. I think he's someone we can definitely use off of the bench.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good name to throw out there. And I'm not against it whatsoever. I think Josh Hart definitely, as you said, has a lot of valuable qualities, and around the board, like he feels like he ticks a lot of boxes. And yeah, I'm not against it. My only question for you, and it's one that you had, not my only question for you, but like my first question for you, and it's one that you had for me. What do you think the price tag on Josh Hart is? Because I mean, as much as there's been some reports that the Pelicans are looking to move him, I still can't imagine they're looking to move him for pennies on the dollar.
Mm-hmm. I'd probably suggest something along the lines of, it's funny, I say, I'm big on Malachi Flynn, but if we're able to get someone like Josh Hart, I would throw Malachi Flynn in there now. Again, Malachi Flynn isn't going to fetch you a lot because his value is at an all-time low, but something along the lines of Chris Boucher, Malachi Flynn, and perhaps, I'm not saying I would, maybe a future second-round pick for Josh Hart, I think would realistically get the deal done. Right? Even if you don't want, Malachi Flynn, throw someone like Aswi Mihailuk in there, right? So give him a shooter, give him, some depth at that power forward position. I know they have Jonas Valanciunas. They also have Jackson Hayes as well. So I think potentially, again, it depends on what they're getting from other teams. It's been a really weird trade deadline where a lot of Raptors fans, including myself, would have thought you would have had to give up a lot to get someone like a Karis LeVert or a Norman Powell and Robert Covington. But it seems like this trade deadline has just not been great in terms of the return for teams giving up players. So, I mean, if the Raptors are buying, which I ultimately think they will, I don't think the price for a lot of role players like this would be too high.
I hear you. I do think there's a big difference though between the situations that you're talking about there with, Karis LeVert and with Norman Powell and the situation with New Orleans. Again, New Orleans is still a young, hungry team with reasonable striking distance to being in the play-in. So I would think they would want to get a good recoup of assets for a guy like Josh Hart. Whereas, with Karis LeVert, Indiana made it perfectly clear they were fire sailing. They wanted to start anew. So, yeah, I mean, in a lot of those scenarios, like you're not going to get the biggest haul, even though I think they're okay with the haul that they got in terms of they got some future assets. They got an expiring. Like, I think Indiana made off well in that one. Trailblazers thing is a whole different situation, and that front office is freaking terrible.
Oh my goodness. I feel sorry for all the Trailblazers fan.
I don't.
I feel sorry for Damian Lillard. I mean,
I
know
don't.
they're trying...
I don't. Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is somebody that thinks he is way better than he actually is. So I feel no amount of fucking, excuse the language, no amount of remorse for that man. He thinks he's out here in interviews, this past offseason talking about how he was inspired by the Dirk situation, how he won his championship, the Giannis situation. He wants to be like that. With all due respect and love to Dame, who's an otherwise reasonably likable guy. And speaking of guy, and here's a fun meme reference for you. You're not that guy, pal. You are not that guy. You're not a Dirk. You're not a Giannis. You're not that good. So you know what? Feel bad for the fans, maybe a little bit. Damian Lillard, absolutely not. He has overestimated his value for so long now that if you were really that good, Dame, you would have done it in Portland already. I'm sorry, you've had some half decent supporting casts. Although, again,
he's ran into some of the all-time great teams, the Warriors, the Houston Rockets, and
he got dismantled by all of them. At least somebody say a lot of people will give flack for James Harden for not winning a ring. At least when James Harden was peaking and when they were going up against, again, for my money's worth, probably the best team of all time, James Harden and Chris Paul were taking it to them, and they at least made you doubt whether or not the Warriors are still going to win. You thought the Warriors would still win, but they at least had a fighting chance. Portland, in that series, the Warriors just comfortably hummed along. Every time it looked like Portland, had a good lead, the Warriors, it looked like almost effortlessly just erased that. They got dismantled. And again, that one Western Conference championship is the only thing that they ever really achieved. So again, to get off this tangent because it's so unrelated, but Damian Lillard, I feel no amount of remorse for. He should have swallowed his pride, accepted a trade to a team where he could have been a reliable number 2 to somebody's real number 1, which he is not. So no remorse, no bad feelings for Damian Lillard. Anyways, let's get back to the Raptors.
I was just going to say, yes, I respectfully disagree, but that's a topic for another video. I also think that's a salary dump with the Portland Trailblazers. We know they're trying to get under the luxury tax, but like you said, let's get back to the Raptors. So we were talking about
trade first round picks to get. Sorry, one last thing. Trade first round picks
and Josh Hart. So yes.
Trade first round picks to get these guys and then use them as salary dumps. That is how an excellent front office is run.
Yeah.
Good job, Portland. All right, now I'm done. All right, go for it.
All right, awesome. All right, so I'm all in on Josh Hart again, like you said, and I think the biggest thing you need to consider when trading for a player like Josh Hart, who's 26, who's making $12 million for the next, the Raptors will have him for 2 more seasons after this season, is if you need to. I'm not saying you should. But when you're acquiring players, you need to ask yourself 2 questions. How is this player going to help our team? And whether or not, if we need to move this player in the future, what can we get from him? So I think Josh Hart, $12 million in today's NBA is absolutely nothing. let's be honest, for bench players that are giving you good production, that's not a lot. And if the Raptors decide they want to trade him in the future, I think he could be part of a package that's something bigger. So he makes a good amount of money. And let's be honest, outside of I don't want to call it the big five, but the starting five of the Raptors, there's not a lot of guys making money. So it makes trades a lot harder. And Josh Hart, again, I'm not saying you trade him because you can trade him in the future, but if you need to, he's making a lot of salary and you can attach him to some other pieces to acquire a piece. So that's my opinion, Josh Hart. I don't know if you want to dig into that or move on to the next player.
No, like I think you bring up a lot of points, and honestly, I'm not going to fight you hard on it because Josh Hart is a name that I like. So I have no qualms with that one. Give me another one. What else you got?
All right, my second player, I was going to say Josh Smith. I don't know why I'm thinking Josh Smith. He's long gone from the NBA. I'm thinking Jalen. I'm thinking Jalen Smith from the Phoenix Suns. I think that makes a lot of sense for the Raptors. He may not be the sexiest name, and let's be honest, he's not going to be the one that probably helps the Raptors win another series. He is one that I'm really intrigued by, though. I genuinely mean this when I say this. He is a player I was looking at, actually, when the Raptors were drafting, obviously, there was no way he was going to fall to the Raptors. He's a player who can rebound, who can shoot threes, who can block shots, and that's what we look for in our starting centers. Now, I don't think he's there yet in terms of having that contribution and really helping the Raptors get, past the first round, let's say, but I think he would be an excellent choice. And the Phoenix Suns, who obviously, are looking to compete for the NBA championship, they would love someone like a Chris Boucher and perhaps a second round pick or a protected first. I'd be willing to throw that in. So.
Jalen Smith, not as big of a fan.
Come on, JJ.
Not as big of a fan as like Josh Hart. I think you nailed it. That's a great name. Jalen Smith, like if you're adding him, like I guess your focus is really on that's a very future minded you know what I mean, like I'm saying it weird, like move as opposed to one that's really going to help you this season. I don't know how I feel about taking on another guy that's going to need a lot of work, similarly to a Precious Achiuwa, where it's like you already kind of have the one project. Do you really want to add another guy that you're just realistically going to need to devote that much coaching and development to? And here's the other thing too, and I really hate to say it, but I don't think Nick Nurse has been that great at developing some of these guys. I think a lot of the guys that are here that have like really thrived and developed in the Raptors organization and put the pitchforks down, but you're going to want to flip them up a little bit, are kind of like a little bit of leftovers from the Dwayne Casey era. I like, you see with guys like Malachi Flynn, they're not really thriving in their development. So I don't know how I feel about, and I say that because I think Malachi's got a decent enough skill set that you could do something with. It's just, it hasn't been done. I don't know how I feel about taking out another guy that's realistically going to be a piece of work, basically. And I don't think he helps you much this season, frankly. So not a fan of that one personally. But I'm sure you have reasons why you disagree.
I do. And I pulled up the stats here. So I honestly think Jalen Smith is further along than someone like a Precious Achiuwa. Now, this was a span of 6 games when DeAndre Ayton was out for the Phoenix Suns. So these are some of his point productions. I'll give you the rebounds over the 6-game winner. He was getting starting minutes and he was playing with Chris Paul. I know Chris Paul makes every big man better. I know you're going to say that. I know you're going to say that.
Counter argument. That is my immediate
I know you're going to say that
argument.
But he's 19-14, 12-5, 19-12, 19-7, 11-14, 15-9. This is when he's getting a lot of minutes. I don't know. I want to pull up his 3-point percentage as well, which I won't, because it's not going to help my argument here. So, but he is able to stretch the floor as well. I know he's shooting percentages wise, it's not great. 3-point percentage is 24%, only about 1-3 a game. But again, I think he's a little bit further along than Precious Achiuwa. Again, his blocks, either when you look at his statistics, they're deceiving. He's 6.3 points, 0.7 blocks. He's shooting 45% from the field. And you may ask, why would the Raptors want him? And he's 6'10", 215 pounds. He doesn't fit your mold of a 7-foot center, but I really do genuinely like him. He's only 21 years old. He's going to be 22 soon. And I know you got a lot to say, JJ. You got a lot to say.
I got 2 points for you whenever you're done.
Okay. I'm gonna let you get on that really soon. But sometimes statistics are deceiving. It's like it's one of those players that doesn't get minutes. I think he's further along than Precious Achiuwa. I think he's very well capable of being a good rebounder. I think it's just being in the right system. It's like when we talk again. I'm not comparing him to the player, but when you take a look at Gary Trent Jr., everyone's all of a sudden hyping him up to. I'm not saying they shouldn't. He deserves all the hype. But where was this hype when he was important? It was because he wasn't getting minutes. He wasn't in the right system. And I know you feel like that about Nick Nurse, and I could agree to some certain degrees. But Gary Trent Jr., he's credited Nick Nurse for his development as well. And I know, again, I'm not going to say he's better than Dwayne Casey. That's one thing I'm going to get Dwayne Casey, but you could also argue Dwayne Casey was in a position where he's expected to, develop players as well, whereas Nick Nurse wasn't really in that position. But
Dwayne Casey was tactically like inept, but when it came to like developing guys and helping them improve their games, I think Dwayne Casey was always a good coach at that. I don't think he gets enough flowers from Raptors fans about that, but I mean, understandably so. It's kind of been a weird relationship ever since he's been gone. Okay, my two things for you. The first one, and it's the one that you already pointed out, but I do have to reiterate it at least one more time. It is Chris Paul, bro. We are talking about one of the greatest point guards to ever hold a basketball in his hands. He could make me look competent on the floor out there. So I do think you have to keep that in mind when you're talking about these guys. Like, Chris Paul just knows how to elevate a team, and in particular elevate a big man around him. So I do like, is the production there from that span that you showed me? Sure. Do I think it could potentially be a little skewed by the Chris Paul factor? Yeah, absolutely. Number two, and this is kind of the other side of it that I don't think we've really talked about yet. Are the Phoenix Suns ready to give up on Jalen Smith yet and move him? Because he is a very relatively easy and sorry, not easy. Like, he's a relatively new add to that team. Are they ready to sit there and be like, you know what, we've seen enough of him. We don't
Yes,
want
they are.
him.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. JJ, I'm going to cut you off for 1 second. Yes, they are, because they declined his player option, which was on a rookie scale. So, like, it doesn't, again, I know they did that early in the season, but it just didn't make sense. Again, unless they're seeing something like bad habits behind the scenes that we don't see, I don't think they're big on him. I really don't, because they've declined his option. Now they have to re-sign him to a contract. I'm not saying he's going to put up those points on a regular, but obviously he's going to definitely get a raise from what he was expected to make. So go ahead, JJ. Go ahead. I'll let you finish your points.
Well, I mean, you cut me off in the middle of it, so that's pretty much finished. Again, if that's how you feel, I'm not super in love with this name personally. It is what it is. On this one, I will absolutely agree to disagree with you. I think you could put any dude that's 6'10" out there with Chris Paul, and he'll average at least 10 and 5. But yeah, unless there's another name that you want to throw out there, I think that's more or less going to do it for us today.
I do have a point to make. Yes, we may disagree, but this is going to be a fun discussion. We're almost done here, but I do have one more point to make. JJ, you say, and I don't disagree with you. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely agree in the fact that Jalen Smith isn't going to be one that's going to help with the core at the present moment. But outside of, let's say, maybe a Miles Turner, who is a realistic trade target in terms of centers that can come in and help the Raptors win now and next year in terms of, like, having an immediate impact rather than an impact down the road?
So, like, are we thinking of both? Like, are you saying ideally, is there a name out there that like can do both?
No. So I was asking you because you said Jalen Smith is more of a player that can help you in the future rather than the present. And yeah. I'm asking you, so outside of maybe Miles Turner, realistically speaking, though, who are the Raptors going to target center? Which target center are they going to target that can help them win now?
Well, you know what, sir? I have a whole video on that you can look at. But I mean, outside of the names that I already mentioned in there, and I feel like this is a guy that you've brought up. I've seen people bring it up in the comment section. Hell, if you want the best of both worlds, Mo Bamba is definitely a name that's out there that, again, will probably cost a first-round pick, but he's a name that
can help the Raptors win now.
That can help you win now and help you win going forward. He's still really young. I mean, if I'm picking between Mo Bamba and Jalen Smith, and I mean, hey, if 5 years from now Smith is that much better and this take ages like milk, then so be it. But I mean, if we're picking between the two now, I'd rather take Bamba. Yeah.
All right, I'm not going to fight you about that. I absolutely agree. I'd definitely take Mo Bamba over Jalen Smith as well. But I don't think he's there yet. I don't think he's there yet. I don't know. Again, I don't know how you feel. I know he's putting up good statistics on the Magic, but that's also a really bad team. He probably won't have the same impact. He may have the same defensive impact, but I don't think he'll have the same offensive impact as he would,
But
obviously on the Raptors.
you could also argue the flip of that is, yes, on bad teams, players need, some players need to put up numbers, somebody's going to score the ball. But at the same time, you could also argue he's on a team where he doesn't have a lot of points and he's still producing relatively well. So you put him on a winning team like the Raptors, can he have a good impact in the today, playing with guys like, again, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes? They're all pretty damn good playmakers and can get him some good, easy looks, shots. And then obviously the defense speaks for itself. Yeah, I think he'd be somebody that'd be able to make an impact this season. I'll stand by that.
All right, I'm gonna continue to fight on this. We're having a good discussion of going back and forth. So I think you do make some good points. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely agree with you that it's harder to produce points on a bad team, but I feel like that would be more of, let's say, someone like a shooting or a small forward that is expected to produce offense. Mo Bamba on the Magic, he isn't really expected to produce points. His job is more of being a defensive rebounder, being that big man, being the rim protector, and then he gets his putback points. Again, I haven't watched a lot of Magic games, but I'm assuming he gets majority of his points on putbacks. He gets a few touches on the offensive side. So I could definitely agree with you in the sense that he's not going to be getting, he's not having enough help.
He's also got a sneaky good capability, I'd say, to stretch the court as well. So that's always a plus.
Oh yeah, no, that's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah. I don't know if you wanna fight me on that, or that's it for today's video, but I'll let you take the mic here.
I don't know what I'm fighting you on, frankly, but at this point, I think the runtime of this video is getting hella high, so we are gonna cut it there. All right, folks, for those of you watching, for those of you still watching, I hope you've enjoyed it. As Ward said, I think we've had a good discussion. I think you threw some fun names out there. I think I threw some fun names out there, and I think depending on, I'm still thinking about it. Like, I actually really like the Josh Hart name. I don't think that's a name I've thought of as much until you brought it up. That's an interesting one. But sorry, that completely off gear. I hope you folks have enjoyed the video. I think it's been great. And if you have, make sure you're leaving a like on the video. It helps the algorithm so much, and we love it out here. And if you're new here, just make sure you're subscribing to the channel. The countdown to 1K, or the march to 1K, goes on, and every day we creep closer. And by we, I mean me. So help me creep. Help me creep.
That doesn't sound weird at all, JJ.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. It's fun. It's cool. It's great. We're dead. And then obviously the man, the myth, the legend himself, the Waraich Report. He's been great today. Obviously, always love having him on the channel. So make sure, if you haven't, seen either one of us, and this is your first time being introduced, and you're subscribing to me, make sure you're also subscribing to him, because you'll get more Raptors content at the very least from him. And it's a lot of quality content. So he's fantastic at what he does. Make sure you're leaving a subscribe for him as well. And yeah, as far as everything goes, I think that's us for the day. I'll let you say your goodbyes.
All right, JJ, I just want to thank you for having me on here. And I've always said this, one of the most underrated Raptors channel on YouTube. So help him get to 1K, guys. We can get there soon. Let's get him to 1K, and let's get the man monetized here. So JJ, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. This was just a lot of fun. Thank you so much for doing this. And yeah, that will be it for me as well. So thank you, guys.
Honestly, my absolute pleasure. Hope it was for everybody out there, and we will see everybody next time.